Good morning, First Baptist. I'm here with Daily Encouragement. We're in Mark chapter 5, and this morning I decided to do something a little bit different, and that is walk you through Mark chapter 5 in more of a visual way. And so I'm going to try to do this for us. So Mark chapter 5 has quite a few things that are taking place in it. Matter of fact, there are three miracles in this chapter that you will read. First, Jesus casts out many powerful demons from a man who was possessed by them. The other thing is that you find a woman with a hopeless bleeding issue. Um, she was helped or healed simply by touching Jesus's garment. And then we find that Jairus' 12-year-old daughter was raised from the dead. Now, what is unique about these miracles is that all three of them were performed on those that were in impossible situations in the eyes of man. So if you look at, for instance, the demon-possessed man, he was incredibly strong, so strong that he could not be bound by man, nor chains, nor shackles. Nothing could contain this guy. He was possessed by many demons. They called themselves Legion because they were many. And so seen as a very impossible situation. The woman bleeding with this bleeding issue, she had spent all her money on physicians, and it got to the point where all her money is spent, and her issue is worse, getting worse. So if you want to call it a chronic or a terminal situation, either way, it was an impossible situation, a hopeless situation for this particular lady. And then, of course, Jairus' daughter. When Jairus came to Jesus, his daughter was sick, and he was begging Jesus to come and to heal her. And of course, Jesus went. And along the way, one of his servants came and said, "Hey, don't bother the teacher because your daughter's dead." And obviously, that's a pretty impossible situation. And yet we learn some things about Jesus in this passage through these miracles that have taken place. First, that he has the authority over the invisible and visible realities of this life. It didn't matter if it was these demons, legion, things that people could not see, a reality, a world that was in the spiritual realm that people couldn't see. He has authority over the spiritual, the invisible. And he also has authority over the physical, what people can see. Matter of fact, this really goes back to the last question or chapter or verse in chapter 4, where after Jesus calmed the sea, his disciples said, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" And it's as if Mark now is taking up the banter to answer that. Not only is he have authority over the sea and the wind, these physical realities, but he has authority over the spiritual world. He has authority over death, even. Um, and so the other thing that we see in this passage, that the things that we think are impossible are not impossible to God. He is supernatural, meaning that those things that are not natural, or those things that we see as impossible, God can do, and and still does. By the way, he didn't stop being a supernatural God after the New Testament was written. Jesus truly is the divine Son of God. We see this question answered in this particular passage through all the miracles that Jesus was performing. These are things only God can do. Only God can raise the dead. Only God can cast out a strong demon. Only God can heal from a lady simply touching his cloak. And Jesus truly is the divine Son of God. And what else do we learn from the response of the people? We learn that God rewards faith. this woman had faith that if she could just touch the garment of Jesus, then she would be healed. And of course, Jesus later on says, your faith has healed you. Then we find that Jairus acts in faith when he goes to Jesus and says, teacher, come and heal I need you to heal my daughter. That was an act of faith. I believe that you can and heal my daughter. But then it escalated. Well, now my daughter's dead. And Jesus says to him, listen, Jairus, uh, don't fear. Do not fear. Only believe. And Jesus was encouraging Jairus in his faith at that point. Listen, nothing's impossible with God. So God rewards faith. And people fear supernatural power. This is why the people after that town, after seeing this man who was possessed by a demon that no one could subdue, was healed. They're like, oh, Jesus, you need to get out of here. There was a fear of that kind of divine power. And we even see the lady trembling in fear as when Jesus said, who touched me? And yet we see people laughing at Jesus when he says, hey, listen, this 12-year-old girl is not dead. She's only sick. Everybody knew she was dead. They're not that dumb. They know she's dead. And so the people were laughing, which brings me to that third point, that people don't expect supernatural power. And I think that is probably, this right here is probably more of our issue, right? We don't expect supernatural power. And some of that is just our kind of our theological culture. There are things we believe about God, but yet we don't necessarily act in alignment with those theological beliefs because we're afraid of being too sensational. And I'm right there. I categorize myself as not a sensationalist nor a sensationalist. I think that you can overhype the sensational and be all emotional and not grounded in theological truth or real promises. But yet, I know these things are true about God, that He can heal and that He can raise the dead and He can do all these things that I think are impossible. He can change hearts that I think are too far gone. I know these things about God, and so this is where God has challenged me through this passage. Jesus told Jairus, "Do not fear, only believe, only believe." And I feel like Jesus is saying to me, John, don't fear, only believe. And so I'm going to challenge myself and you with three questions to ask yourself as you process this particular passage. First, do you believe that God can accomplish in people's lives what you see as impossible? Do you believe that? Do you believe that God is still actively displaying His power over the physical and spiritual world? And finally, do you pray toward that end? Now, that's where the kicker is, right? Like, yeah, I believe He can do this. Yeah, I can believe He can actively display His power of the physical and spiritual world. I believe that. But do you pray toward that end? Or have you already determined that God is not going to show off His power? We have a God who is all powerful, and we believe these things about Him. And my challenge myself is am I praying toward that end? Does my prayer align with my theological beliefs about who God is, or do I fear? Do I fear disappointment? Do I fear other people perceiving me as sensational or whatever it might be? So here's my prayer to the Lord today is that, Lord, help me to believe. I know that you are powerful and actively displaying your power. Help me to pray toward that end and not give in to the fear of being labeled a sensationalist or the fear of being disappointed. Lord, help me to pray in alignment with who I believe you to be. For your kingdom is not a matter of talk, but a matter of power. So, Lord, help me to believe. May that be your prayer this morning as well. God bless.